thank you very much for inviting me for today's session. So like Molly said, yeah, I am the parenting coordinator for the ADHD Foundation, but I think more importantly, I'm also parent to two neurodivergent young people. So I've got two autistic children myself. I say children, one's an adult, one's 13. And so my 13-year-old definitely experiencing some of the challenges that we're going to talk about today. So definitely this is a topic that I can relate to and certainly living through at the moment. So let me just find my buttons to move on my screen. Oops. Here we go. So in terms of neurodiversity, so neurodiversity itself, it's just basically a word used to explain the unique way that people's brains work, really. So everybody's brain is going to develop similarly, but also no two brains are going to work in the same way. So being neurodivergent itself just means having a brain that works differently from the sort of average or the neurotypical person. And that might be around differences in terms of social preferences. It might be differences with ways of learning. It may be ways of communicating. It may be a difference in the way they perceive the environment, for example. So in terms of neurodiversity, approximately 20% of the population are neurodivergent. So that's a fifth of our population. And also in terms of neurodiversity, what we find is when our young people, if they are, are diagnosed with one of the conditions, we often find that there are also co-occurring conditions alongside the diagnosed conditions. So that just basically means that there will, for example, if they're diagnosed ADHD, there may well be another condition that they may well have a diagnosis for. It may be that they have been identified as some traits of another condition, for example. And we always say when we're talking about co-occurrence and neurodiversity that it tends to be the rule, not the exception. So majority of neurodivergent people are likely to have more than one condition. Thinking about our teenagers, so the teenage years can certainly be difficult for any teenager, whether they are neurodivergent or not. The surges of hormones combined with those changes to the body, and certainly for a lot of our young people, trying to find their sense of identity, where they fit in with their peers, for example. Maybe that they're trying to navigate and form those friendships as well, whilst being expected to develop that sort of independence, really. So certainly for teenagers in general, that can be a really confusing time. But for our neurodivergent young people, that can be particularly difficult. So our neurodivergent teenagers, they're going to experience exactly the same physical hormone changes as their neurotypical peers, but they may have additional challenges, additional struggles. So they may well struggle with those physical, social and emotional aspects of puberty. They may well become overwhelmed with the physical changes that they experience. So thinking about those growth spurts, thinking about the changes in terms of body hair, or maybe developing acne, they may well struggle with those actual physical changes. They might find it really difficult as well to communicate how they're feeling, communicate their emotions, and we can sometimes see an increase in anxiety, an increase in mood swings, an increase in irritability, things that we see for those sort of typical, those non-neurodivergent young people, but they can certainly be exacerbated by our young people in terms of their conditions. They're going to have their own unique strengths. They're going to have their own experiences of challenges that are all personal to them. But all of those factors that I've just mentioned, as well as maybe having co-occurring conditions, as well as environmental factors that may well impact on our young people. So if we think about if they've got some sensory differences, for example, if they've got challenges in terms of their executive function skills, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail, and also just the general pressure to fit in. So often our young people, they're expected to try and fit in with others, and that expectation may well come from themselves, or it may be pressure from other people around them, and all of that can contribute to the experience of our neurodivergent young people. Can make those sort of exacerbate those challenges during puberty. Excuse me. So as well as having sort of key features of their whatever condition, neurodivergent condition that they are diagnosed with or identify with, like I've said, there's going to be challenges around things like those executive functions. So they may have difficulties with planning, with organising themselves. And this is at a time for our teenagers when the expectations and demands on them have increased. You know, they're in high school, they're expected to be able to do things independently, they're expected to be able to organise themselves, they're expected to be able to plan and prepare for themselves without very little or any support. In terms of emotional regulation, so being able to identify, understand and manage their emotional experiences. Quite often for our neurodivergent young people, we can see a delay in the development of those skills. And again, this is at a time when we expect our young people to be presenting as more mature. We expect our young people to be able to manage those emotions more effectively. Sensory differences as well. So we may have young people who are under or oversensitive in some areas, and we may see some increased sensory seeking behaviours or increased regulating behaviours, particularly if our young people are feeling anxious or stressed. Our teenagers are going through those physical and emotional changes that are associated with puberty. So we might see sleep challenges, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail as we go through the session. So we can see challenges with our young people settling to sleep. They may well be waking through the night. We may see disturbed sleep. We may see them waking early, or we might even be seeing difficulties with waking them up. Also, in terms of relationships, there's a lot of there can be a lot of challenges and pressures around relationships and difficulties with navigating those relationships, not just with peers, but with adults and the expectations of adults as well. There may be that sort of struggle, like I mentioned, in terms of managing the increasing independent expectations that we have of our young people. And all of these things may lead to additional anxiety, to conflict and emotional dysregulation for our young people, which then, as we know, can have a significant impact on home life. So if we can gain a better understanding of how these complexities are impacting on our young people, then we can hopefully support them better through those tricky teenage years. In terms of the executive functions, like I mentioned, so the executive functions are often referred to as the management system of the brain. So they develop through childhood and adolescence, and then they would mature in the mid to late 20s. Now, for our neurodivergent young people, there can be a delay in the development of these executive functions of up to 30%. So if we think about, you know, our teenagers, it might be when we think about the utilization of these skills, so being able to use these skills, then we may see a delay in that. So if we think about 14-year-olds, for example, in terms of being able to manage their impulse, in terms of being able to manage their emotions, in terms of being able to plan and prioritize and organize themselves, you know, how we would expect a 14-year-old to manage that may look very different to our neurodivergent young people, when they may be functioning more like that of a 9-year-old, for example, and our 18-year-olds may be functioning more like that of a 12-year-old. So that's not about IQ, it's not about intelligence, it's purely about the utilization of these executive functions. So if we think about our young people, using our 14-year-olds as an example, if we give them some instructions, you know, are they able to follow through with that when we're asking them to complete tasks? Are we expecting them to be able to organize themselves independently? They may well seem very immature or not able to complete the tasks that we would expect them to be able to do in terms of their age. So again, this may well then exacerbate any feelings of stress or anxiety our teenagers may well be experiencing. And again, just think about school alone. You know, we have the expectation that our young people can use these skills to be able to function and navigate within our education system. Again, you know, if this is something that they are lagging behind in terms of the development of, is this something that's causing anxiety for our young people? Is it causing frustration, which then again, thinking about maybe conflict, stress and anxiety that may well impact them on us at home. But if we think about what some of those skills might look like, so, you know, in terms of managing their impulses, are our young people, do they tend to think before they act, or not think before they act, as I say? Are they not considering the consequences? Are they saying things that may well be inappropriate or engaging in risk-taking type behaviour? Can't get my words out this morning, apologies. So having that kind of jump first, think later type of attitude. So, and again, we often see this in teenagers in general, but, you know, is this sort of further heightened for our neurodivergent young people? Being able to manage those emotions, being able to keep those feelings in check, being able to control their emotional responses. So do they seem to kind of overreact, or do they seem highly emotional? Do we see quite often rapid mood changes and big emotional responses to things for some of our young people? Flexible thinking, so are they able to adapt to change? Do they struggle with unexpected changes? Are they able to sort of transfer those flexible thinking from one environment to another? Are they able to adjust in terms of the expectations, in terms of social rules as well? Working memory, so being able to keep that key information in mind. Are they struggling to remember and process and act on information? So do they have challenges with remembering instructions? Do they seem forgetful or miss parts of the conversations, for example? Self-monitoring, so can they judge how they're doing? Can they reflect on their actions and their behaviours? Can they check in with themselves and adjust their behaviour to how it needs to be in that moment? Planning and prioritising, so being able to identify what is the goal, being able to prioritise what the goal is and put a plan in place to achieve it. Sometimes we often see our young people in terms of that procrastinating type behaviour. Are they able to identify what is the priority, what is most important? Are they able to estimate how much time is needed for a task as well? Task initiation, so again, just thinking about being able to start a task in the first instance, or actually if they start a task, are they able to end the task and move on to the next task easily? So are they able to cope with those transitions? And then organisation, so being able to keep track of things, not just physically but mentally as well. Do we often see the challenges for our young people with organising their belongings, for example, keeping order in their personal space? Do they always have messy rooms? Do they always have a school bag just full of papers? Are they able to organise their schoolwork in terms of notes with each subject, for example? Are they always losing things? So thinking about our young people, you know, and these can be challenges that we see in general anyway for teenagers, but often for our neurodivergent young people, like I said, there can be a 30% delay in the development of these skills. So where we might expect our 14-year-olds to be able to independently complete, you know, a lot of these tasks or be able to utilize these skills, are we actually seeing that our 14-year-olds are actually functioning more like that 9-year-old, and we're having to help them organise themselves for school, for example, or we're having to help them organise themselves to be able to complete their homework, or we're having to support them and prompt them and organise them to be able to tidy the bedroom, for example. And thinking what that might look like. So again, for some of our young people, we might see them shutting down because they're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information that we may give them. So if we think, for example, about asking our young people to go and tidy their bedroom, for example, do they just shut down? Do they find the job so overwhelming because it's such a big task that actually they're not able to do that? Do they often say to you, I don't know where to start, I don't know how to start? Do you have to help them to be able to organise that task? So do you need to sort of break it down for them and motivate them to even be able to do that? So do you need to say step by step what they need to do? So for example, make your bed, put your laundry in the basket and put your books on the shelf. Are you having to break things down for them to be able to complete a task? Do you find yourself constantly having to repeat those instructions? Actually, do you even need to break it down to the point where you're saying, go and make your bed, and once they've completed that task, then go and put your books on your shelf, and once they've completed that, go and put your laundry in the basket? Do they need that level of support? Do you find that you're having to almost sort of gear them up, or constantly tell them and prompt them to do what needs to be done? We might see our young people having big emotional responses to things, and not necessarily just negative emotional responses. For some of our young people, we'll definitely know when they're feeling excited, they're happy, they're sad, or they're angry. So if they're becoming frustrated, we see in big emotional responses. And for some of our young people, just being able to imagine how to get from the start to the finish. So certainly for me, if I was going to tidy a room, I would go into that room and think, okay, I know what I need to do to sort of get myself organised, get myself started, and I know where I need to be to finish, and all those steps in between. For some of our young people, just being able to imagine, just being able to sort of envisage and know how to get from that start to finish, to be able to put that plan in place, can be difficult. Being able to plan how to achieve what they need to do. And then we might find that for some of our young people, actually, and I certainly get this a lot with families, they'll say, actually, some days they do that fine, and then there's other days when they can't, they just can't do it, or they don't do it. And actually, we can often see for some of our young people that they aren't able to consistently do those things well. So it might be that on some days that they're great, they're able to organise themselves and retain the tasks, the information, the instructions that we've given them, and they can go and complete that task. And other days they just seem to be overwhelmed quite easily, not able to retain that information. So we can see that inconsistency. And so, like I said, for our young people, our neurodivergent young people, they can often be operating up to 30% behind their peers in relation to those executive functions, but also in terms of their emotional maturation. So remember, I've said this isn't about intelligence or intellect, but it's about their ability to utilize those functions. So again, thinking about our 14-year-olds, what are our expectations of them? So we would expect them to know, for example, what lessons they're going to have in school, to be able to organise their bag, to remember their PE kit, their homework independently. But would we expect that of our 9-year-olds? Would we expect actually to support our 9-year-olds to do all those things? Our 18-year-olds, for some of us, or for some of our 18-year-olds, they're off to university at 18, they're living independently away from home, they're managing budgets, managing work alongside university, going shopping, preparing a meal, doing laundry. Again, would we expect that of our 12-year-olds? So again, thinking about what is realistic in terms of our expectations of our teenagers. And also in terms of those emotional responses. So are we seeing big emotional responses to things, sorts of situations that are seemingly immature? So again, are our 14-year-olds, when they're having emotional responses to things, does it seem to be that more of a 9-year-old? Are our 18-year-olds having emotional responses more fitting with that of a 12-year-old? So again, thinking about how would we manage our young people in terms of those emotional responses. So, again, how we would manage a 14-year-old would look very differently to how we would support a 9-year-old in terms of their emotions. Also, in terms of independence, so, teenage years is very much a time of life when our young people are trying to establish their independence. And you know, things like memory, for example, there can be areas that can be very frustrating for our young people in terms of being able to behave independently, act independently, be independent. So thinking about things like memory, if they can't seem to remember instructions, if they can't seem to remember things, always forgetting things. So are they always forgetting things like their lunch money? Are they always forgetting their bus fare? Are they always forgetting what books they need on what days for school, for example? Are they struggling to plan and organise themselves to do tasks? Are they struggling to even start a task? Do they need us to prompt them, to motivate them to be able to do those tasks? Are they able to manage their time effectively, or are they always late, or over or underestimating how long a task is going to take? Are they always forgetting the rules? Are they always pushing those boundaries? And they're thinking about what are our expectations for our teenagers. Like I've said, as they get older, we have these increased expectations, but they may not be realistic when we're thinking about those delays in those executive functions for our young people. Sensory issues for our teenagers as well. So quite often our neurodivergent young people will experience maybe some sensory differences, and the sensory differences can certainly impact on many aspects of their life, from school and work to relationships and hobbies. So sensory differences, basically sensory processing is about how our brain and our body processes, interprets information from all of our 8 senses, and that can impact on how we react to things. So if we're seeing sensory differences for our young people, it may well be impacting on their ability to sleep, on their ability to relax. They may be over or understimulated. They may be sensitive to environmental factors such as noise, light, smells, temperature, for example. And we might see that our young people are then becoming dysregulated. Certainly it might be that they become dysregulated in school or after certain activities. Sensory differences we can often see impacting on our young people in terms of their diet. So we can often see picky eating habits. We can see them maybe avoiding particular foods with particular textures and particular tastes. Also for some of our young people, they may be unaware of internal signals, so they may not be getting the signals. For example, if we think about foods and diet, they may not get the signals to let them know when they're full and overeat. But certainly if they're not getting those internal signals, again, you know, are they recognizing those internal signals when they are becoming emotionally dysregulated, for example? And we can often see challenges in terms of discomfort with certain movement. We can see challenges and differences in terms of certain types of fabrics or certain types of touch. It could be clothing items, shoes or seams, labels, those types of things. And those sensory differences can often cause our young people to become dysregulated. So they might become easily overwhelmed. We might find our teenagers avoiding certain environments or avoiding certain types of activities. We can sometimes see our teenagers, because of these sensory differences, maybe isolating themselves, refusing to go to school if they're frequently feeling overwhelmed in school. So certainly understanding our teenagers' sensory needs can be helpful in supporting them on a daily basis. Thinking about puberty, so during puberty and adolescence, our children's brains undergo a period of rapid growth, really, as their bodies transition into adulthood. So our young people, like I've said, you know, they may seem emotionally immature, and they may experience some delays in that emotional maturation. So that might mean, like we've said, you know, in terms of being able to needing support to be able to organise themselves, to be able to think about consequences, whether that be the consequences of things that they're saying or things that they're doing, and also support to regulate their emotions. but certainly puberty can be done for any teen. In terms of those physical changes, it might be around those, just thinking about the rapidly changing hormones for our young people, new routines that they will need because of personal hygiene, and the impact of mood swings because of those hormones, and becoming aware of their sexuality as well. So all of these things place added stress onto our teenagers who are neurodivergent. And I think in terms of supporting our young people in terms of puberty, it's really important that we prepare ourselves to be able to support our young people through these changes. And certainly I would say before the onset of puberty, if we can prepare ourselves and sort of have a plan about how we're going to support our young people, then that can be helpful. And thinking about, physical changes and being open in terms of conversations about the physical changes that are going to take place for our young people during puberty, and discussing how they may experience those changes. What are those changes going to look like? What happens? So talking about the fact that they may experience growth spurts, talking about the fact that breasts and genitals are going to develop, talking about the fact that there's going to be growth of pubic and body hair, talking about acne, and how the voice may change for some of our young people, how their muscles may change and grow. Also talking about menstruation for some of for our girls, thinking about how they are going to manage that as well. Also, we can often see an increase in sensory sensitivity. So if we've got some young people who are particularly sensitive, we might see changes in those sensory sensitivities, or an increase in those sensitivities. But also thinking about, personal hygiene. So personal hygiene will change for our young people. So talking about how is the best way for them to manage that. How is the best way to manage, showers and shaving and deodorants and those types of things. When we think about hormones for our teenagers, so changes for our young people in hormones may well sort of impact on their emotions and their ability to emotion regulate. So we might have young people who are already struggling with emotional regulation, which is then exacerbated by these hormones, in young people who are not emotionally mature enough to be able to sort of cope with that. So thinking about, how we can support our young people, being aware as well that puberty is often a time when our young people are going to explore their identity. They're often trying to sort of figure how they fit in and where they fit in terms of social groups. And we know puberty in general is often associated with increased risk-taking behaviour. So young people may become more impulsive, and you may well already have young people who are already impulsive. So are we seeing an increase in those types of behaviours? Mood swings, we know mood swings go hand in hand with puberty quite often. So our teenagers can often feel very intense feelings, and it might be feelings of sadness or anger or anxiety, irritability, for example, and they might not necessarily fully understand why. They may become more emotionally sensitive, and we might see a decrease in motivation as well. And then sexuality. So adolescence is certainly a time when our young people go through sort of that sexual development and sexual maturation. And I know certainly it can be difficult to have conversations about sex and sexuality with your young person, but I think it's really important that we do have those conversations despite it being uncomfortable, because if we think about, certainly in my day, when I found out information about sort of sex and sexuality, it was very limited. It came from school quite often, and if you were lucky, you would have parents that would have those conversations. But now information is widely available to our young people on the internet, on social media. Young people are more aware and can have access to information far more easily than they ever did before, which can be a positive. because, you know, our young people have got access to a wealth of information and answers to any questions that they might have. But it can also be really worrying to make sure, you know, certainly for young people who may be vulnerable to negative or harmful information. So it's important that we make sure that the information that they're accessing is, you know, is helpful and is safe for our young people and accurate, really. So if we have that open communication with our young people, we can make sure that they're accessing that information safely and that it is accurate. Sleep is often an area that our young people are affected. Sleep challenges are especially common among our neurodivergent young people, and can again have a significant impact on the lives of us as a family. So typically teenagers are needing between 8 to 10 hours sleep per night for their well-being. So often teenagers go through a period of having that tendency in general to stay up late, and that's due to those sort of changes, those biological changes in their biological clocks, really. And also the impact of things like, you know, it might be that they have earlier starts for school, there's the added pressure of homework, maybe they've got extracurricular activities that they engage in, maybe they've got social activities that they're engaging. So certainly all of those everyday challenges and everyday additional expectations can also impact on our young people in terms of sleep. A lot of our young people are neurodivergent, young people can certainly have difficulties with getting to sleep. And we can often see that sort of delayed sleep stage. So we can often see for our young people that they might sort of present as night owls. They might sort of seem to become alert during the evenings rather than getting sleepy. They might well be tired throughout the day, but it's like kind of as soon as it's bedtime, we might see that those thoughts start racing. They're thinking about what, you know, can't switch their mind off, thinking about one thing or another. It might be that during the nighttime, during the evening, they may well sort of do things that they enjoy, do things that they're engaged in. We might see them becoming hyper focused on something because there's less distractions maybe of an evening. And so then they find it difficult to end that task and move on to something, and to be able to sort of move on from that activity to be able to settle them to sleep. So we can often see for our young people difficulties in being able to settle to sleep in general, but certainly a delayed sleep phase, which is really common during puberty anyway, is when that circadian rhythm, that sleep-wake cycle, shifts to a couple of hours later for our young people. So their sleep pattern is often delayed by 2 hours or more than the conventional sleep pattern. So if you've got a young person who, you know, you would expect them maybe to be going to sleep about 9 or 10 o'clock, they may actually not be feeling tired until at least 2 hours, maybe more. So, you know, instead of feeling tired or sleepy at 9 o'clock, it's 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning when they're feeling sleepy. We can also have challenges in terms of melatonin, which is a hormone which is associated with sleep, not being produced when it should, or not enough melatonin being produced for some of our young people. Also, in terms of some of the activities our young people engage in, they're often cognitively stimulated. So thinking about what types of activities they're doing, are they becoming over aroused? Are they becoming overstimulated before bed? And then when they do finally fall asleep, often for our neurodivergent young people, they might sort of fall asleep but be restless through the night. They might sort of toss and turn. They might waken up with sort of any noise in the house, for example, or you might find that when they wake up in the morning, they've been really restless and the bed covers are everywhere, you know, being kicked to the floor as if they've sort of had a party in their sleep. And then we can also see then, you know, for some of our young people, if they do frequently wake through the night, once they're up, they're up. So you might have young people that are falling asleep later, then having restlessly, for example, but then once they're up, they're up. or actually we can have challenges with getting them up in the morning. They might feel excessively tired in the morning. They might be experiencing that daytime fatigue and have difficulty through the day staying awake or staying alert through the day. So certainly for our young people, what we want to promote is good sleep hygiene, limited screen time, reduced caffeine, and a consistent sleep routine to be able to improve their sleep. Sleep in general, so for our neurodivergent young people, they're going up to 80% of them will experience some sleep challenges. Now that's in comparison to children who are in the general population. Generally, children will, up to 50% of children will generally have some sleep challenges at some point. But like I said, that massively increases to approximately 80% for our neurodivergent young people. And there can be additional challenges for our young people, our neurodivergent young people, that may well be impacting on sleep. So thinking about things like environmental cues. So they may have challenges with picking up on those environmental cues. We may have to be explicit in terms of letting them know that actually sleep or bedtime is imminent, really. So thinking about, everybody usually has some sort of, even if it's just a loose sort of routine in the evening when evening is approaching. So thinking about, maybe you might close your curtains at a certain time, you might have dinner at a certain time and then watch a soap. There might be that then, there's a certain time when they have the shower or the bath, for example. For some of our young people, we may assume that they are picking up on those cues as it will soon be time for bed. And for some of our young people, we might need to be explicit in terms of that routine. We might need to be explicit in terms that those cues are indicating that it's time, it's coming up to time for bed. So thinking about, maybe it's a schedule, maybe we're going to support that visually for our young people, but they're well aware, we're explicit in them sort of knowing what the evening routine is, that it's bedtimes, then chores, then homework, for example, then it's their favourite soap that they may well watch, then it might be that they have their bath, read for a little bit and then bed. But we're explicit in terms of what that is. We're not just expecting them to pick up on them environmental cues. Also, sometimes if there is changes to routine, even daytime routines, for example, so certainly at the moment we've got Christmas coming up, we're about to have some school holidays. For our teenagers, everything may change during those school holidays. Certainly physically things have changed in environments. We're seeing Christmas decorations everywhere. School lessons may well have changed. They may well be going on some organised Christmas trips. There may be some flexibility in terms of lessons. Certainly everything in the community has changed. And for some of our young people, they can really struggle with those changes. Of an evening, you may well have, on weekends, you may have planned some additional activities that we wouldn't typically do. So it might be that, you're going to see the lanterns, or go to see a pantomime, or so there may be additional things that have added into what you would normally do at weekends or evenings. But as well, if we think about just the change in routines from weekday to weekend, so do your young people, do you let them have a lie-in? Do they go to bed later? For some of our young people, if they're already struggling with that sleep-wake cycle, then those changes can cause additional challenges for our young people. In terms of co-occurring sleep challenges, so as well as having co-occurring conditions that I mentioned earlier, for some of our young people there may be co-occurring sleep difficulties. So we might see, quite common can be obstructive sleep apnea, for example. We can see restless leg syndrome, that delayed sleep phase that I've mentioned, which is common, insomnia, so not being able to switch off the mind, not being able to switch off all those tabs open, before going to sleep, and that also bedwetting can be increased for some of our neurodivergent young people. That poor circadian rhythm, so not making the right chemicals at the right time, so maybe not producing that melatonin, that nighttime hormone that helps us to fall asleep. For some of our young people, they might be producing it much later, or they might not be producing enough. So it's thought that, for example, those with ADHD produce melatonin at least 45 minutes later than their peers. So thinking about that melatonin production, and again, we can see things, increased night waking and taking longer to fall asleep for our young people. So we can see bedtime resistance. If our young people are cognitively stimulated, for example, certainly one of the big challenges around bedtime resistance can be if our young people are not feeling tired, if they have experienced that delayed sleep phase. It might be that they're refusing to go to bed, they're refusing to go to sleep because, yes, it's 9 o'clock, but actually because of that delayed sleep phase, I'm not tired yet. We can also see that things like the impact of blue light. So if our young people are using electronic devices, for example, so smartphones, computers and other digital devices, those devices emit a blue light that can interfere with our young people's sleep. So that blue light exposure suppresses the production of that melatonin, of that nighttime hormone, that sleep promoting hormone that is in the brain there. So if we can avoid our young people using those digital devices before bed, at least an hour before bed, then that can be helpful and support that melatonin production. Even if we're using those, because certainly you can get those blue light filters now, even if our young people are using those blue light filters, then again, thinking about what they're going on their devices, are they cognitively stimulating, are they sort of raising those alertness levels? Also, for some of our young people, thinking about everything that we've talked about, thinking about the challenges in terms of executive functions, and thinking about the challenges in terms of maybe some sensory sensitivities, some sensory differences. For a lot of our young people, we may see that they are feeling stressed, they're feeling anxious, and they're in that fight, flight, freeze response. So if our young people may find it really difficult to be able to manage those emotions, to be able to settle to sleep, to be able to, and again, thinking about the emotional responses that we're seeing from our young people, quite often we might be seeing those exaggerated, or what we think are exaggerated emotional responses to things. We might see that our young people are often moving up that stress response curve quite quickly, and things like not having enough sleep, frustration and challenges around those sensory needs, like I've mentioned, challenges around those executive functions, maybe always getting into trouble for forgetting books, forgetting instructions, forgetting lunch money, forgetting bus fares, can cause them to move up that stress response curve. So if we think about our young people, they may start off their day calm and thinking rationally, but quite easily they may well, things may happen that cause them to move up this curve. They may accumulate for them throughout the day. So it might be for our young people, they've had a restless night, and so they're up that curve a little bit. Then it might be because they find it difficult with those executive function and managing their time. They may be a bit running late for school, so they move up that curve. Then they've got those sensory sensitivities in terms of their touch system, for example, so have to do personal care activities, so hair brushing, teeth cleaning, face washing, that moves them up that stress curve. Then they are struggling with unpredictable environments, they're struggling with transitions, they're struggling to retain the information from the lesson for the teacher to be able to complete the task, and they move up that stress response curve. So for our teenagers, we can quite often see them moving very quickly up this curve to these boom moments where our young people are feeling overwhelmed, and we can certainly see big emotional responses, or our young people shutting down. So thinking about how we can help support our young people with with these challenges. So certainly, you know, making things as predictable as possible for some of our young people, be thinking about, do they need some additional processing time, giving them that additional 10 seconds to be able to process the information, process any requests or demands we've made of them, giving them those instructions one at a time, breaking them down into manageable chunks. Remember what I said about those executive functions, and that working memory. Maybe as well thinking about whether we need to use commands and not questions sometimes. So, you know, how are we wording things for our young people? Are you saying, would you like it to go and tidy your room, for example, rather than can you go and tidy your bedroom? Thinking about how you're communicating your expectations, being clear and concise about what our expectations are, and using visuals as well to help our young people process information. If they're struggling to retain information, if they're struggling to retain instructions, can we support that visually? Can it be, it might just be a post-it note with those tasks broken down. So for example, the tidy the room, you might just put that on a little post-it note: make bed, books on shelf, washing in laundry basket. So thinking about that and building in movement breaks for our young people can often be helpful as well. Providing a routine and structure can be really helpful. So making things predictable, making things structured so our young people know what to expect, they know what's coming, can be really helpful. It can help with making help them to break activities down, to be able to support transitions as well. Also means that, you know, their environment is safe, they know what's going to happen, they know what to expect from that. It supports their understanding of what, where, when and how long things are going to last, and can certainly reduce for our teenagers that frustration, that anxiety. Also that routine can support in terms of independent skills. It can support our young people. It's things like, as well, if we think about making things visual, if we think about things like being able to prepare their bag for school the next day, you know, if we can make it part of their routine that they prepare their bag the evening before as part of their evening routine, and they have a list for each day what they're going to need in their bag, and they can go down that list and make sure that they have everything that they need and that's supported visually for them, and that will promote their independent skills. And also in terms of time management, can we support them, you know, if they're likely to run out of time to do tasks, can we support them to be able to overestimate how long a task is going to take? Can we support that time visually as well for our young people? If you've got young people who are struggling with flexible thinking, so maybe struggling with change, supporting them to be able to plan ahead, supporting them to be able to know what to expect, especially if they're going somewhere different, and supporting them again with the routine, what is going to be expected of them when they get to where they're going, what is who is going to be there, what does it look like, where can they go if they need some quiet time, making everything as predictable as possible. If something's going to change, if we can give them as much notice as possible, and also if you know, if something's coming to an end, if there's going to be a transition, can we give them a 5-minute warning as well? Can we give them a signal that something's coming to an end and they're going to be moving on to the next task? Time for our young people as well, so just thinking about making that time external, like I've said, using those digital timers, using those analog clocks, overestimating how long tasks are going to take, I've mentioned, using physical timers, using alarms on their phones, on their watches, checking with them all the time as well to make sure that they're okay. So, you know, thinking about examples like if you've asked them to go and tidy their bedroom, if you've asked them to go and do their homework, checking in with them to make sure they're on task, to make sure they're okay. Do we need to support them? Do we need to prompt them with that? Thinking about how we can support our young people as well in terms of their sensory needs. So again, thinking about building in common activities for our young people that can be helpful throughout the day. It can be daily activities that you know, that are just included with their chores, for example, so carrying heavy items, putting the bins out, anything involved with push and pull and lifting boxes. So if our young people are having big emotional responses, giving them strategies throughout the day to help them sort of calm. Thinking about if they're going out in the community with you, they need activities in terms of navigating around those busy supermarkets. Can they carry the basket? Can they push the trolley? Can they carry the shopping to the car and from the car to home? Also things like chewing gum can be really helpful, or chewing chewy snacks, or sipping water from water bottles. I always have a toolkit with me for my daughter, and just things that I know that can support her with that if she's starting to become overwhelmed in sensory environments, or in terms of her emotional regulation, that'll just help calm and organise her. Also thinking about drinking things like milkshakes or smoothies or yogurts through a straw can be helpful, and building in activities for our young people which involve things like running, jumping, climbing and dancing. I would say monitor them. For some of our young people, they can be overstimulated, but also activities like gymnastics or horse riding, swimming, they can be really helpful. Puberty in general, so preparation, like I mentioned earlier, preparing ourselves, so picking up information and resources that are going to support our young people in advance, supporting them with those physical changes. So use social stories, use books, and model things as well. So model things like shaving, model using hygiene products, model using face washes, different types of shampoos, how they wash their hair, and use physical prompts and reminders as well. So it might be thinking about things like sanitary products. Do our young people need to use reminders, alerts to maybe check those sanitary products, to change those sanitary products? Talking about the types of deodorants and when to use deodorants, and use visuals and schedules maybe to help them develop a routine and good personal hygiene habits. Consider those sensory needs as well. So you might need to experiment with different types of sanitary products, for example, different types of shaving appliances, different types of shaving creams and gels, and building in exercise can be really helpful for our young people. So really quickly in terms of sleep, so again, just thinking about the environment from the sensory point of view, thinking about the temperature for our young people between 16 to 18 degrees can be really helpful. A dark room to support that melatonin production, restful colours. Think about noise. Some of our young people might need it really quiet. Some of our young people might need to have some white or brown noise, so maybe a fan or waves or rain. Think about the nightwear. Is it comfortable? Are they going to be comfortable right throughout the night? Is their bedding comfortable? Do they need to wait to bed in? Is it screen free? Can those screens be switched off an hour before bed? And is the room distraction free? So if they do wake up, are they not likely to be distracted through the night? And just really quickly, just thinking about apps, video games, again, think about what your young people are on before they go to bed. Are they becoming sort of cognitively stimulated? There can certainly be some benefits in terms of electronic devices for our young people, especially for young people. My son certainly finds engaging with his friends on technology much better, but manage risks, thinking about what our young people are accessing, have good guidelines, have rules, and talk openly about the benefits and the risks in terms of those apps. And oh, sorry, lost my train of thought for a second then. Very quickly, just in terms of emotional regulation, just helping our young people to recognise their own responses, their own reactions and responses to things, being able to identify how they're feeling, using things like scales, show them that maybe that stress response curve as well. And then there's just some additional strategies on screen there that might well help for our young people. I won't go through them all, I'll leave them on screen for you there, but building in maybe quiet time, physical activity, sensory items we've talked about, muscle relaxation, deep breathing, deep pressure massage technology, and yoga and meditation. I'm not conscious I've gone massively over. I do apologise. I'll leave them on screen for now so that people can just see them. That is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave, if that's okay, Molly, I'm just going to leave those on screen just so people can see that little list there. You might want to take a screenshot.
Absolutely, thanks Tracy. It's a shame we've run over because it was a brilliant presentation, and we've actually had loads of questions coming in, so we'll try and get through as many as we can in the few minutes we've got. So the first one is, my daughter does not fit in with other teens on her college course and is missing out socially. Any ideas to help this? She wants to spend time with friends her age, but is still quite immature.
Yeah, it can be really difficult. And I kind of always say to try and support your young person to find a group of peers, I suppose, that have got similar interests. That might be a good way to start. I had to do that with my son. So the first thing we did, we found groups, for example, that young people with similar, like, so for him, he likes very specific type things. So he likes Pokemon, he likes manga, and so for me it was very much about building social opportunities using his interests, because that makes it easier to have some way of making a connection, and you're talking about your interests rather than the pressure of those social interactions. So it can be really difficult, especially for our older young people, but if possible, maybe supporting them to be able to access something that is interest led initially while they're trying to sort of figure out where they fit, but it can be really difficult.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Tracy. Next question is, we are experiencing delayed sleep with a 10-year-old, and it is one thing that is playing into school avoidance as he's too tired at the normal wake-up time. Is there anything we can do now to be more prepared for sleep issues as he hits puberty?
So I would start working on that delayed sleep now. So for young people who experience delayed sleep, what I would suggest is having a set wake up time and a set sleep time. Quite often we fall into the sort of habit of letting them have a lay at weekends or during school holidays. If they're already struggling, then I would try and have a set wake up, set sleep. What I would also do is maybe try and find their base. So for example, if they're tired at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock and you want to bring that forward, start with the base. So you have your set wake up time, your set sleep time is 10 o'clock, but you're wanting to get that to 9, and then maybe bring it forward by 15 minutes once you've got that established, and then bring it forward again and gradually work on that. Introduce lots of daytime activities, lots of exposure to daylight in the day, and then in the evening, you know, we want to support the production of that melatonin. So drawing those, especially in the lighter nights, drawing those curtains earlier, having low lighting. So just trying to sort of bring that sleep phase back into order, really bring it forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Tracy. We'll just try and get through this last one. Do you know any alternatives to melatonin that could help an ADHD child get to sleep? I know there's concerns around melatonin potentially interfering with puberty. Thank you.
So I would, if you're not looking at melatonin, you're not looking at those prescribed medications, I'm assuming you're talking about. So I would be looking at lots of exercise, lots of daytime exposure, thinking about what types of foods they're eating, what activities are they doing before bed as well. So sometimes the activities our young people are doing can have an impact on them in the night. So especially when we think about our senses, our vestibular system is very much so it's our balance system, but it's linked to movement, but also our arousal levels. So for example, if you've got a young person who has been in the park, you think you've worn them out, they've been running around at the park, And then actually what happens is you're having challenges with getting them to sleep. So that vestibular system, that all that movement has actually had the opposite effects. They may have been come over aroused. So I would be unpicking what foods are they having. Can you introduce sleepy foods? So foods that contain tryptophan. Can you have a good evening routine, not just an hour before bed, but maybe after dinner all the way through. Good sleep hygiene, relaxing room, lots of daylight exposure. Again, that, you know, low lights, draw the curtains, thinking about having calm and activities before bed, screens off before bed, all that good sleep hygiene.